Welcome back into the locker room. I'm your host, Will Kronsberg, joined once again by Braden Maloy. This week we are going to talk about NBA trades, the upcoming trade deadline this month, and I think it really starts with a trade that we saw a couple months back, which saw James Harden go from the Houston Rockets to the Brooklyn Nets, and a couple other pieces moved around. Victor Oladipo went from Indiana to Houston. Karis LeVert went from Brooklyn to Indiana, which was actually really good for him because he found a small health issue, and the physical with the trade helped him get there. But that has kind of sort of been the only major trade that we've seen this season, with a few really small exceptions. So Braden, I have to ask, where do you see the trade market really heating up and getting big?
I really see it in kind of the big man category. I mean, we see it now with Embiid, what he's doing, and Jokic. These teams are finding big men, not traditional big men, that are going to go and put up 20-plus rebounds, maybe get you 5 points, and just kind of be a body in there, but versatile big men that can maybe step back, shoot a jumper, that can pass it to the wing and all. I think that's where Andre Drummond comes into play. He's with the Cavs right now, but they're sitting him, trying to look for a trade. He hasn't been playing these past couple weeks. I think he can be a real asset to a team like the Lakers, who are looking for a big man that can play alongside AD, maybe when he's sitting or if he's still hurt, or when AD decides to play out on the wing and the perimeter, you can keep it in there to get the ball back and get you some points down there.
So obviously Drummond is with the Cavs, a former Piston, and you look at another current Piston, Blake Griffin, started his career with the Clippers, been with the Pistons for a few years. He also has not been playing as they explore a trade or a possible buyout down the line. Do you think that a team like the Pistons, who just traded away Derrick Rose, do you think that they're more of a seller, looking to get rid of Rose, Griffin, kind of reset, grab some picks, and come back in a year or two? Or do you think that they're positioning themselves to be a contender in a sort of weaker Eastern Conference this year?
I think they're sellers. They don't have the firepower on offense to really win games enough games to really be a contender. I mean, they got rid of Rose, who's still a producing point guard, even in his later end of his career. And even though Blake Griffin is not the Blake Griffin of the slam dunk contest and jumping over the car and what he was with the Clippers, he can still produce and still give you points. But I think if they got him on the trading block, they're looking for a rebuild.
So obviously the Pistons we see are a team that is looking to reset in the East. But I want to talk about two teams that maybe could be bigger contenders in the East. One of them we knew was going to be there. The other one has been a little bit more of a surprise, and that's the Boston Celtics and the New York Knicks. The Celtics have been hovering around 500 for a while. They have young stars, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, but they can't get over that hump. They can't seem to really get on a run this season and find that consistent production. So do you see anywhere or anybody that they could pick up that could really just position them to be at the front of the pack?
I think you can go over to another East team, maybe this one out of the country up in Canada. If you take Lowry from the Raptors, he's a great backcourt. I mean, we've seen him when he was with Kyrie, or not Kyrie, when he was with Kawhi, and they went on a win, and he was with DeRozan. He's a very valuable asset in that backcourt and a scorer. And I think if you can move him over to Boston, pair him up with Tatum and Brown, I think that's you're kind of looking at a big three that can maybe rival the big three up in Brooklyn.
So that's obviously a case where we see one team that's been sort of around the top of the East for the last couple of years taking a step back, grabbing some picks, grabbing some younger talent, and allowing another team to flourish. We look at the Knicks. The Knicks have been in playoff contention most of the year. They have Julius Randle, who's an all-star, but nobody's really looking at them and saying, that's a team that I have going to the finals. They're still in that position where they're not fully there. They could be sellers at the deadline, or they could be buyers. They could send some of their young talent. They have Kevin Knox, who was a first-round pick a couple years ago. Frank Ntilikina, the same. Alfred Payton, Austin Rivers, and a couple other players that they could package together and potentially get another star. So do you think that the Knicks are going to position themselves to try to stay around that 5 to 7 area in the East, or are they going to send some of their younger players away?
I think this is the first time in probably 5 or 6 years we can actually say the Knicks are looking to make a push for the playoffs. As you mentioned before, they are they're in playoff contention and have been for the majority of the season, with Julius Randle doing what he did, the in-season trade for Derrick Rose at point guard. I think they have got the pieces. I don't think they're able to make the finals this year. I think Brooklyn and the Sixers and maybe Boston are just too strong. But I think they can at least make it first round, maybe a second round team, if they can find a piece this trade.
Now, Braden, I want to throw something at you really quick. A crazy trade rumor that I saw potentially involving the Knicks, which is Karl Anthony Towns. Obviously, he's the star out in Minnesota, worked with current Knicks coach Tom Thibodeau a couple years back. And, it was sort of a rocky relationship. The Timberwolves never really got to where they were hoping to go. But do you think the potential of Karl Anthony Towns going to New York, potentially making the playoffs for only the first time in his career, and, restarting with an actual okay team? Do you think that's a possibility?
I don't know how likely the trade is, but I think it would benefit the Knicks greatly. I think adding a guy like Cat, who's actually kind of more of a veteran now than rookie, but is still very productive down in the paint. We mentioned getting rebounds. Every extra possession counts. With teams scoring upwards of 130 points a night, you need those possessions. You need to keep scoring. So adding a guy like Cat down there that can get you the rebounds, but he can also run a post game, and he can also pull up and shoot a mid-range jumper. I think that would benefit the Nets a ton. I don't know how likely that trade will be, though.
I have to agree. I mean, I would love to see Cat move to New York, but it's not likely. I think the Knicks would need to send a lot of those younger pieces that I mentioned, and potentially some picks, since the Timberwolves traded their first-round pick, which is likely to be very high. They traded that one to Golden State in the D'Angelo Russell trade. So I think that's an unlikely move for the Timberwolves as they try to stay afloat somewhat. I do want to look at another team in the East, the Sixers that you mentioned a second ago. They've been close. They haven't been to the finals. They've been close the last couple of years. They have Ben Simmons. They have Joel Embiid, and they have Seth Curry. But they definitely need one more piece to kind of really shore them up and make sure they can get past the Brooklyn Nets. Where do you see the hole in Philadelphia's team, and who do you think can fill it?
I think a hole they really have right now is shooting. With Embiid, he's a great post player. He's in lead MVP conversation at the moment, but he's not a shooter. He gets down in the paint, gets the dirty points. And we all know Ben Simmons' jump shot is nothing to write home about. So I think if you take somebody like J.J. Redick, a vet in the league, he knows his way around. He's been to the playoffs. He has that kind of experience. And you put him on this team, and he can help facilitate, but he can help them score points from the perimeter. And I think adding him to the perimeter takes a lot of the defensive attention off of Embiid, and that will only make Embiid better if he has more one-on-one or maybe just even two-on-one matchups. Being able to spread out the floor like that with a shooter like J.J. Redick, I think can only help their offense. Now,
I want to look at another player, J.J. Redick's current teammate, which is Lonzo Ball. And we know Lonzo Ball was a second overall pick just a few years back with the Lakers. He was obviously involved in that Anthony Davis trade, moved to New Orleans. Do you think he stays in New Orleans, or do we see him get moved this month, and to where?
I think eventually he'll get moved. I don't know if it's this year. It might be over the offseason. I just think he's not panned out for the Pelicans as they were hoping. He was supposed to come in and be a generational talent, kind of pairing up with Zion this year, and they would be one of the two new dynamic duos of the league. He's kind of come more in just kind of a passer and facilitator at the moment. The points aren't really coming along with it. I don't think if they trade him that he will be – I think they'll have to pair him with somebody. I don't think they can just trade him for pieces. I don't think his value is there anymore to be a solo trade. So I think they'll have to pair some other pieces from the team to look for a trade. And then I think he could go to a team that maybe is kind of shored up on offense, but he could be maybe a sixth man, seventh man that could come in off the bench, give you 15 points a night, eight assists, and kind of just shore up the back end while the stars of the team are resting or out.
I agree. I mean, I think he doesn't have that individual value that the Lakers and the Pelicans have hoped over the last few years. Actually, ironically, I think a young player who has sort of filled that role of a really high potential, taller combo guard is his younger brother. LaMelo Ball has been flourishing in Charlotte and hopefully gives them a lot of versatility going forward. Now I want to throw one last name at you, somebody who definitely wants to be traded. He'll leave Houston if he doesn't get traded in the offseason. So that's obviously Victor Oladipo. He's been on a few teams in his career, most recently with the Pacers, traded to Houston in the Harden trade. Hasn't been exactly happy as Houston kind of shuffles along near the bottom of the West. So where's Victor Oladipo going to end up after all of this?
I think he's going to go over to an East team. I think at the moment, all the playoff contenders in the West kind of have their sure-handed point guards in backcourt. I think they're kind of, you got the Suns with Booker and Paul, and you got even the Warriors still. Clay will come back next year, so you got Curry and Clay. So I think his home is somewhere in the East. You can maybe pair him up in Boston. You can maybe send him down to Miami, pair him up with Butler. I think that could shore up that offense. You can maybe send him up to Toronto. If the Raptors end up trading Lowry to another team, they'll be looking for that backcourt piece, and I think Oladipo can give them that boost. The Raptors are always in that playoff contention, so I think you can just slide Oladipo in and be a good fit.
Sure, and I think Miami is his preferred destination. When all is said and done, it's just about if he'll get traded there right now, or if he'll go through somewhere else and then have to consider signing with Miami in the future after he rejected a $45 million 2-year extension earlier this week. So anyway, that'll do it for us on this week's edition of The Locker Room. For Braden Maloy, I'm Will Kronsberg. Thank you so much for watching.